conservative,
Christian, mother, wife,
Air Force veteran,
gun rights advocate.
This is Stacy on the Right. Here's your host, Stacy Washington.
Indeed it is, and we're doing the most on Stacy on the Right. Thank you for being with us. Glad you're here. So much going on. True Social blasting out that Breitbart News is reporting that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, on Tuesday launched an impeachment inquiry into President Biden's abuse of power, obstruction, and corruption. This is the news of the day. So many other things going on. Welcoming into the show to help us unpack all of this, Connor Vasile. He is a law student, writer, and contributor to Young Voices. Young Voices is found at young-voices.com. Thank you so much, Connor, for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me, Stacy.
All right, so let's talk about your article, which is over at The Federalist, one of our favorite websites ever, thefederalist.com. It's entitled, Californians Had Better Arm Themselves If They Don't Want to Be Victims of Crime.
Yeah, so I believe we've all seen at this point in time that article that went viral about how in Oakland, California, which has actually been ranked the 40th most dangerous city in America for this year, residents actually went to the town hall meetings and they were pleading with city officials and the local police for heightened police precautions, for better surveillance, for making more arrests because of the outrageous spike in violent crime and theft that has been occurring there. As a response, the city and police thought it was a good idea to recommend that each resident carry an air horn on his or her body in order to alert friends and neighbors if someone, I guess, is stabbing them to death or stealing their car. So that's pretty outrageous, and it just shows how the city of Oakland and also California as a whole is just disregarding personal sovereignty and our innate right to defend ourselves and our loved ones when harm comes. So I want to take this opportunity to really write an article to spread the word on how our elected officials, they don't even seem to want to fake about caring about our rights anymore. They just are blatantly outright against them.
Right. So, and again, anyone in any part of this country knows that far better than an air horn to just say, why don't you get a defensive knife, a gun, take some self-defense classes, enroll in Krav Maga. Why would anyone think that an air horn would be sufficient in a case like this, especially with the violence and the crime being so far advanced?
Well, Stacy, I'm sorry, but you're just not looking deep enough into this. The air horn represents restorative justice, which allows everyone a good second chance, even if they're trying to harm you or your family. It's just this disconnect, I find. It's completely ridiculous. You see this throughout California. For example, in LA, where you had constant break-ins into the jewelry stores, grocery and commercial outlets, as well as people's personal property and cars. City officials, including Mayor Karen Bass over there in LA, they just don't care. They think that this is a trend or a fad that will go away in time. But at the end of the day, nothing is being done systemically to combat this rising tide in crime. And it's concerning that people either they don't want to defend themselves, and I understand they may be apprehensive about the idea of training with a firearm. But at the same time, what are you going to do when you are faced day in and day out with constant violent crime and these criminals who just want to take everything from you and know that the state will not defend anyone's rights in the process?
So the defense of yourself and others is a well-known justification for caring not just for yourself. It's actually a biblical mandate. If you see someone who's harmed or about to harm themselves, if you see someone who's in danger, you're supposed to work hard to stop it. You're supposed to take action to stop that from happening so that person can be safe. So what is the reason that and I heard you say restorative justice, but I'm still trying to wrap my mind around anyone saying that it's okay, basically to take that tack that people who are trying to hurt you would want to give them a chance to maybe come around, and so by that very virtue of wanting them to come around, you're not going to defend yourself. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, it's a very weird, twisted, modern version of turn the other cheek, I suppose, where people just expect, oh, I'll just give them the benefit of the doubt and everything will work out peachy keen, right? That clearly is not the case. I mean, this isn't only restricted to California or Oakland. We see it in New York City. We see it in Chicago. We see it in Atlanta, Georgia, where you have public officials. I'm just going to use Chicago for an example. You have their mayor over there who is scolding reporters and journalists for calling teenage mobs, well, mobs. He prefers to call them large gatherings because it stigmatizes the people involved. Meanwhile, who gets hurt the most? Working class and minority communities, especially above all. And I believe it's just some sort of twisted PR stunt in order to get votes or more support from the disaffected voter or the low information voter at this point, because they are just set in a position where they not only not care about defending people's property and their rights and their well-being, but they are actively doing everything they can to basically demoralize the population. I think that's the ultimate goal at the end of the day.
Well, it's very effective. I could see where a
Yeah.
person would feel extraordinarily demoralized if they've been physically attacked, you've been assaulted, and the answer to that is, well, restorative justice. That is demoralizing. It's depressing.
Indeed.
So the answer for Californians is obviously a difficult one because they don't have, it's very difficult in California to get anyone elected who isn't an actual Democrat. So what do you recommend to people who are in California? Because it's a tough road.
Exactly. And as you just mentioned, electing anyone who doesn't have a little D next to their name is very challenging. I mean, Gavin Newsom, he succeeded over his recall effort. Even this district attorney, Pamela Price, whose jurisdiction includes Oakland, who is now calling all the residents racist for wanting heightened police protection. There is actually currently a recall effort against her as well, but knowing California, unfortunately, that probably won't go in a positive way. So in terms of what Californians can do right now, as I mentioned in my article, it would be great if they can take some sort of self-defense classes, firearm training. They can still do it in California. It's a little more tricky in that state. However, it's still possible. And if they're not comfortable with that, then I highly suggest that they start looking to live in another city or even another state, because at this point, clearly the hierarchy involved does not care about their safety and their well-being. And if they are not willing to defend themselves, then they really need to start looking into moving.
And it's interesting that you say, moving out, because the one of the most significant stories of the year has been the out migration from California. It has been stunning. At one point, U-Haul had so many more trucks leaving California than coming in that it was like a crisis for the company, because they just, they have to keep some trucks there for people who are going to move within the state. There was that much of a problem. So obviously a lot of people have already made that choice. They've already decided that they're going to live somewhere else, and they're doing that for their own safety. So it would appear that people agree with you, but it doesn't change the fact that for some people, especially if they have family, they're probably not going to move. They're not going to leave because they have too much at stake there. They're just too rooted in the place.
True, we can definitely sympathize with that notion. There are people who cannot move, whether they have a physical impairment or they have familial responsibilities or financial obstacles that prevent them from moving. We can definitely sympathize with them. However, at the end of the day, who's in control of their own safety and their own bodily autonomy? Well, they themselves. If they're not going to move, then they have to take the necessary precautions in order to defend the lives of those they love the most. If that's family, if that's friends, neighbors. And at the end of the day, it's going to be up to them to make that choice, because clearly the police aren't helping. Even if they start arresting 100% of the criminals on the street, it's not going to matter much if all the DAs and the prosecutors are just letting them back on the streets, or they're downgrading all the charges down to misdemeanors, as we see in New York, as we see in various parts of California, etc. So at the end of the day, if the state, which is supposed to help us all and protect us, isn't doing their job, then you can't really rely on anyone other than yourself. It's just the hard knocks of life.
Yeah, the responsibility, ultimately your self-defense, the responsibility for it always lies with you. But it's an interesting scenario when you know for a fact that the government could be helping you and they're not, when you know that elected officials could be helping you and they're not. It's kind of like, you know, it feels like the Twilight Zone, I think. I think people are really feeling abandoned.
True. It really feels actually we've gone past the Twilight Zone. We're just in a liminal space and trying to figure out what's going on now. It's definitely an interesting time to say the least, but we need to take some agency and actually figure out how to fix this, because unfortunately society will not last long enough under this current outlook.
Well, in your article, you talk about, and these statistics are staggering, you have Neighborhood Scout rating Oakland as the 40th most dangerous city in America, currently experiencing a violent crime rate of 12.57 assaults per 1,000 inhabitants, 5,452 violent assaults a year. Violent crime is up 15% compared to last year. You talked about the fear. Those statistics are definitely a demonstration of how valid those fears are, and I just would hope that people would do their best to defend themselves and to just take it into your own hands. Don't be afraid to take it into your own hands.
On that note, it's really interesting because it seems like a lot of people these days, they are more afraid to take the responsibility of defending themselves or learning how to safely handle and carry a firearm than they are of having their life in danger. And I also mentioned in the article how basically recent FBI statistics, they conveniently left out the fact that there's actually a very large number of violent crime instances or shooting instances that have been stopped by legal firearm holders and carriers. Up to 40% of them have actually been stopped by individuals who legally carry and own a firearm. And if you look at all the states that actually allow constitutional carry, where you're not even necessitated to have a permit, you don't see shootings and violent crime going up as much as look at Chicago or Oakland or LA or even New York. You do not see an increase in, let's say, legal firearm owners committing crimes, even though Governor Hochul in New York would like to say otherwise. We're not seeing that happen. Why? Well, when people take their own lives into their own hands and have the responsibility to learn how to safely defend themselves with a firearm, you actually find crime going down. You find people being less victimized, not more victimized. And I think as a society, we really need to hone in on that point and make people realize that, no, defending yourself by any means necessary is your God-given right. No one can take that away, and you better practice that everywhere you can.
I love it. I think that's a fantastic place to close out here. The story is over at thefederalist.com. It's entitled Californians Had Better Arm Themselves If They Don't Want to Be Victims of Crime. So good to talk to you tonight. Thank you for writing this and also for being a voice of reason out there. And it feels like in the darkness, but you're shining light here. Connor Vasile, law student, writer, contributor to Young Voices. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful night. So we will have more Stacy on the Right for you after this. Stay right there.